Welcome. My name is Danielle Hubley. I am a part of the Hartford Votes Coalition, Hartford Vota Coalition. We're a nonpartisan coalition of 14 different organizations and agencies that are all listed on the back of your programs tonight. Our mission is to increase voter engagement in Hartford and to help people participate in the democratic process. Tonight's candidate forum is for the state rep for the 4th district. The office is currently vacant, will be filled by the winner of a special election on June 4th. All candidates were invited and were able to attend tonight, so we're happy to have them here. We're going to introduce them in a minute, but their bios and a little bit more information on them are all listed in your programs as well. Just a few quick things before we start. I want to say a thank you to all of the Hartford Votes members here tonight and all of the volunteers who were able to help out tonight. So if you're in the audience or around, raise your hand, because thank you. It was a wonderful help to have you tonight. We also want to thank the City of Hartford's Registrar of Voters for providing voter registration at this table right over here tonight. So if that's something you would like to do tonight, you have the option. So thank you to them for being here. We also want to thank the Hartford Public Access TV for recording tonight's forum. It's going to be available on their website, so if you want to look back at it or have it for later, it will be available. Restrooms are located down the hallway and to the left. The ladies' room is just before the men's room. And you should have received a feedback form in your pamphlets tonight. Just be sure to fill that out and return it to this red bin right in the corner here before you leave, because we take all of your comments to heart and we do our best to improve the forms from there. If you're interested in more of our events in the future, we are looking to do some more programs. We are now on Facebook. So on the front of your program is listed the Hartford Vota Coalition. You can find us on Facebook, and we will be posting about our future events through there. From there, I will introduce the candidates now. So on my far right, we have Julio Concepcion, and he is currently the endorsed Democratic candidate. He is the vice president of the Hartford Partnerships for Metro Hartford Alliance. He was previously assistant to the mayor of Hartford and is a member of a number of nonprofit boards of directors. Next, we have Jessica Inacio. She's a petitioning candidate. She is a business development associate where she coordinates recruitment and manages relationships with the business community. She was previously employed as an executive policy advisor for the Hartford City Council and the legislative aide for the Connecticut General Assembly. Next, we have Brian Nelson, who is the endorsed Republican candidate. He has been involved in law enforcement since 2007, and he previously spent 5 years as a volunteer firefighter with fire companies in Bloomfield and Windsor, and is currently an instructor with both the fire and police academies. And lastly, we have Mary Sanders. She is a write-in candidate. She's been employed for 30 years in the nonprofit sector, where she worked in direct service and administration, and she has now focused her attention on energy on volunteer activities and activism in Hartford. She's an advocate for all things green. Lastly, I would like to introduce our moderator, Dr. Bilal Siku, and he is an associate professor of political science in Hiller College at the University of Hartford. He is chair of the governing board of Common Cause in Connecticut and a member of the board of directors of the Connecticut Center for a New Economy. And really quickly, before we get started, I'm just going to run through tonight's program. So we just did the welcome and introductions. Next, we are going to go through the candidates' opening statements, where they'll have 2 minutes to introduce themselves to everyone. Next, we are going to have 4 predetermined questions that we've picked. The first candidate will have 2 minutes to respond, and everyone after will have a minute, and each question will correspond with the candidate speaking for 2 minutes first. From there, we're going to move on to audience questions, and we will have a microphone being sent around, and so just make sure that your questions are asked into the microphone so that way they can be caught on camera, so that way we have them in the recording. And from there, once the audience questions wrap up, we will have one final question that each of the candidates will get a minute to respond to. And with that, thank you for being here tonight. We are very happy to have everyone, and we're excited to get started.
Well, thank you, Daniela. That was a great introduction, and I'm looking forward to this night. I hope you guys are also looking forward to it. Seems like we have 4 very impressive candidates who are running for the 4th District public office here, and so why don't we start this off by giving each of the candidates an opportunity to start with an opening statement.
First of all, thanks to Linda, Richard, and the entire Hartford Votes Coalition for putting this important forum together. I was actually part of the Hartford Votes Coalition a long time ago, so I know how hard it is to put something like this together, and especially in a short time period. And thanks to all of you for coming. I mean, it's a gorgeous day out here. You could be anywhere, but you're here to listen to four great candidates here for the 4th District. Just quickly, by way of background, I moved back to the city of Hartford after graduating the University of Connecticut back in 2004. I moved into the district. I had an opportunity, as it was said before, to work for then Mayor Eddie Perez as a community liaison, where I spent 3 years working on constituent issues, specifically down in the South End. The last 10 years of my career I've spent at the Metro Hartford Alliance, which is the region's economic development leader in the city of Hartford's Chamber of Commerce, again, working as a liaison between our community and the city of Hartford itself, the elected officials, the departments, and the community and nonprofits. My wife and I decided to move back to the 4th District because we knew exactly where our heart was. We met here, we moved in together here, we got married here in the 4th District, and we want to raise our daughter here. In my mind, the 4th District is the most important district in the state of Connecticut. It's the economic, cultural, and political hub of the state. It houses some of the area's most incredible assets, but with all those great assets, we have a lot of challenges throughout our district: poverty, unemployment, some issues of quality of life that are rampant throughout. So that's one of the reasons I decided to run for office. So I look forward to answering a lot of the rest of the questions. Thank you.
My name is Jessica Inacio. I am a Democrat and a petitioning candidate on row C. I am a Hartford native. My parents are immigrants. They moved here in 1984, settled in the South End, and have been here ever since. I was born on Hillside, grew up on Fairfield, and became a homeowner in the South Downtown almost 3 years ago. After attending public schools in Hartford, I volunteered in Nicaragua for a year after college, where I worked with displaced persons to establish sustainable businesses. When I moved home, as I was introduced, worked for the state senate for 3 years and also for city council for 2. About a year ago, I completed a dual master's at UConn in public administration and survey research with a certificate in public financial management, and accepted my current role attracting businesses to relocate to and invest in the state of Connecticut. I chose to run for this seat because living in this district especially, I see that the city is broke, the government is broken, and the 4th District has not been represented. We cannot afford to have a representative who is not ready to get to work on day one. And with me, you get just that. With the experience that I have working both with the city and the state, I know my way around both of those buildings and both of those processes within them. Not only in terms of the legislators on either side of the aisle, but also the staffers, who are really the people who get things done more often than not. So on day one, I will be ready to work. And my priorities are fighting for state aid for Hartford, because without that, we can't really get to many other priorities. It's working on economic development, but not just at the big level with Aetna and Travelers, but small business as well. It's addressing housing issues throughout our community, not just downtown, and quality of life issues that our city is seeing increasingly. With me, you get somebody who is accessible. I intend to be somebody who is in the community because I have been somebody who's been in the community. And I believe that if you do not have access to your representative, then they cannot represent you because they do not know what you are experiencing. Thank you.
Good evening, Dr. Siku, and thank you. First, I want to thank the Hartford Coalition of Votes for sponsoring this event for the candidates of this forum. I'd also like to thank the Republican Town Committee, some members which are here, for endorsing me as a candidate in this election. It's an honor and a privilege to be here and to be able to participate in this event. My name is Brian Nelson. I'm a candidate for state representative for the 4th District in this special election. I'm proud and honored to be able to participate in this election. We have a lot of problems here in the city of Hartford, and we face a lot of issues. But we have an opportunity here in 2018 to change Hartford and turn it around into a thriving city instead of a failing one. With all the issues and all the problems, I look at this time as time where we can turn things around, especially in our district. My focus will primarily be to restore safety and quality of life in our neighborhoods by focusing on public safety needs and creating legislation that maximizes penalties for repeat offenders instead of providing them with a second chance to victimize our residents and our visitors. I am the only candidate on this stage with actual public safety experience, which includes 11 years of law enforcement experience and 4 years of firefighting experience. Tonight, I look forward to answering your questions, and I look forward to hearing from my friends on this stage. Finally, I believe it's vitally important to remember, regardless of our political party, we all are on the same team. We are here with a strong effort to revitalize Hartford and make it a safer place for our families, for our businesses that are able to prosper without any obstacles, and to restore the quality of life and keep it strong to retain our residents and to attract many more. Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you all for coming, and thank you to Hartford Votes for putting this on and for inviting me to participate. As an outsider and as not a member of the major parties, sometimes you have to go an extra mile to be able to be included, so I appreciated the invite. A little bit about myself. I'm retired past 2 years. I had 30 years experience working in human services and workforce development. I've been living in the South End of Hartford for 23 years, and I've been involved in a lot of things outside of my work at nonprofits, volunteer work and activism, standing up for justice for people. I've been up at the Capitol. I do know the environment there. I've been going there for 20 years to testify about different issues, ranging from racial profiling and serving on an advisory board to change racial profiling laws, looking at police accountability and transparency, and trying to institute some protections for all, whether they're police officers, firemen, or firewomen, and the general public. I have copies of testimony I submitted at different places. Getting involved in the South End of Hartford, I've attended a few of the meetings over at for the NRZ and learned a lot about the situations going on. But even more than that, since I sold my car 2 years ago after I got laid off, busing it and speaking to people at the bus stops and in meetings and out getting signatures for my petitions, I spoke to hundreds and hundreds of people in our district that cannot vote. But they need representation too, and a lot of them are misinformed. They think they can't vote because they're on probation. So I want to, work on the sentencing and the probation and parole issues, as well as making sure people have access to decent housing, making sure people have access to food and health care. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. Those were great opening statements, and we certainly have some very good candidates up here on stage, and we have an opportunity to learn a lot from them tonight. So the Hartford Vote Coalition has created some questions that I will ask, and as Daniela said, we will save some time for you guys to also become a part of the conversation. So as they move through their questions, if there are things that come to mind for you, to maybe jot that down for yourself so that you will be able to ask that question later of all four of the candidates. And when we get to that point, I'll talk a little bit more about the way we're going to proceed with that. So let me start with the first question, and we're going to start with Julio with the first question.
Good.
So obviously a big issue in the district will be education. So the first question will be about education. The education of Hartford's children obviously is a very important issue. What role can you and other state representatives play in assuring that children obtain the skills and information they need to lead productive lives as adults?
That's a great question. Education has always been a strong part of my household. My grandfather was a principal here at Kinsella. Father was a teacher at both MD Fox and Betances here in the district. So I learned the value of a good education at an early age. The first thing that I would say that legislators should do is, one, support the teachers, support the individuals that are in the classrooms on a day in, day out basis with whatever they need, whether it's training, more supplies, more funding, again, for the actual teachers themselves. Legislators have to, especially in an urban setting like Hartford, have to advocate for more ECS funding here in our city. We obviously received a large amount of ECS funding, but with the challenges that a city like Hartford faces, we need to advocate for more ECS funding throughout the state. Something else that I would bring up is early childhood education. As my mother's, just thinking of my mother as a kindergarten teacher here, or paraprofessional here, the value that a child gets an education when they're under 3 years old it's invaluable to set them up for success throughout the cities or throughout their career. So we have to ensure that we as a state, we as a district, we as a city supply our children with early education opportunities. And then the last thing I would say, just because it's kind of top of mind with everything going on, is we need to advocate for more ELL funding. Obviously, with the influx of Spanish-speaking individuals that have come from Puerto Rico as due to the Storm Maria, we have to at this point really advocate for that. Thank you.
I definitely think that our school systems need attention. Being a product of Hartford schools, I've lived their needs, and I've seen how those needs have increased over the last 15 years. I would like to bring light to the issue of funding, because I think we hear a lot from elected officials. We need more funding, we need to advocate for more funding. However, council passed a budget that underfunded the minimum budget requirement for the Board of Ed by $1 million. Meanwhile, they suggested that they would make a $20,000 cut and never managed to do so. I would also say that not all council members were present at the budget meeting regarding the Board of Ed. So I'm a little troubled with that, because it's one thing to say during an election season that you're going to advocate for more funding. It's another thing to actually live that message and do so. I do think that we definitely need more ELL programs, not only for our newest residents, but also for the ones that have been struggling to learn the languages long before now. I think we need more programs in our schools. When I was in, time's up. There we go.
Great question. I am also a product of Hartford schools. I was attended St. Augustine Catholic School, and as well as St. Joseph Cathedral School, which do not exist anymore. The churches are still there, but the schools are closed. I'm also a graduate of Weaver High School, which is also closed. It is being rebuilt from what we hear. But I strongly believe in the public school system as a way for children to develop the skills that they need. Busing them out to Enfield and Windsor or other towns, is not in their purview. I believe homegrown education is important, especially in a day and age where we see a lot of juveniles committing crimes in our community. And I also believe, while it can be a part of a state representative's responsibility, it solely falls on the municipality and the city in which the school is. And time's up.
Yeah, I moved to Hartford when my girls were in middle school, my youngest two children, and they were having trouble in New Britain schools. Okay, so I brought them to Hartford, and they did well at South Middle, and went on to Bulkeley for a short time. And then everything fell apart in high school. Same thing happened with one of my grandsons. But not to say that they didn't go back and get their adult education and go to college, but I see a breakdown once kids get to high school. I agree that early learning is important, and elementary and middle school. But when kids get to high school, there has to be some way there to keep them in. And I think a big piece that's missing is parent engagement. I know a lot of the parents in Hartford are engaged in their children's education, but there's others that are not able to. So I think it's up to the schools to try to find ways to be creative, to keep those teenagers in school, to keep the parents engaged, and make sure those children graduate and go on to college.
The second question that the coalition came up with deals with the issue of transportation. And I'll read the question. Connecticut and Hartford are facing a number of transportation challenges, such as the need for replacement of the I-84 overpass and its effect on adjacent neighborhoods, increasing pedestrian and bicycle use of city and town roads, possible eastward expansion of fast track, and the question of tolls. What ideas do you have for addressing transportation challenges that we face here in Hartford and also in the state?
I think that transportation needs are definitely a huge issue in these last legislative sessions, but especially to Hartford. The 4th District is the crux of where all transportations meet, not just 84 and our roads, our pedestrian and bike walkways, but also a new train system and the fast track as of a couple years ago. Based on what I've heard of the fast track, I think it has been a positive addition to this region, and encouraging it to go east would likely bring access to more people who currently have limited transportation options because Connecticut is not very connected. I'm excited that there is a rail coming next month, or 2 weeks from now, to Hartford, and I think that that is really critical to making Hartford more viable to be able to get to New Haven, to Springfield, and through New Haven to New York. What we do with 84 is critical. We really need to ensure that the dollars that we invest now, we don't look at just based on what we can afford, but based on what the best investment is long term. Because if you spend half as much now, but need to fix it in 20 years, well, that's not really an investment, is it? But I do think that as that hopefully opens up more developable land in Hartford, we need to keep complete streets at the core of our development and make sure that bicyclists and pedestrians have equal access to the roads. We want our downtown more walkable, but we also want our communities more walkable. And part of transportation is the sidewalks and the roads have not been paved in many years, and we need to start with addressing needs in the neighborhoods as well. We can't just look at the centers of transportation for the commuters that are coming in and out of the cities, but also the communication or the transportation methods that all of our residents use daily, which more often than not is sidewalks and roads.
Anyone who travels through downtown at rush hour or even through our district near Bulkeley High School is going to be forced to face traffic issues. Some options available that have recently come up in the few number of years are Uber and Lyft. And there's lots of ways where residents can get around the city other than public transportation like buses, which are very large and create other traffic issues. In regard to 84, let's face it, Connecticut, or Hartford specifically, is about 18 square miles. We're not going to have an I-10 run through Hartford with multiple lanes. So addressing 84 is an issue, but I believe it's one that's on a larger scale, and we really need to focus on what we're doing in regard to repairing it, because is it really worth it tax dollar-wise?
Yeah, as far as the 84 issue, I haven't been following it as closely maybe as I would have if I had still been driving. But since I started using the fast track, and Hartford buses are pretty good. I've been doing that for about 2 years, walking a lot and taking buses. So I do appreciate the bus service that we do have and using the ability to use the fast track. I do fill in with Uber here and there, and I'm really concerned about, some of the traffic jams that exist in the city of Hartford downtown and around school areas. It took me a half hour to get from the south end of Hartford to the north end of Hartford the other day in an Uber, and the guy was trying to go this way and that way, and there was just so much backed up traffic and detours, and there was nobody directing the traffic, so people didn't know which way to go, and it was just bottlenecking everything at a rush hour. So I think we need more alternative routes, like to get from one end of the city to another end of the city, maybe not major highways, but some other routes that are not so backed up with school traffic, at that critical hour.
No doubt that any successful, vibrant city throughout the country has both safe and equitable transportation options. And we have our challenges here in the city. Obviously, I-84 being the gorilla, but I think that's also an opportunity that we have here in the city. Our speed limits throughout our streets have to be looked at. There's no doubt about that. And our lack of bike lanes, as someone mentioned, is something we need to really look at. But we do have some opportunities here in the city over the next several years to really look at our transportation options. Jessica mentioned the Hartford Rail, which is going to be a game changer, I think, opening up on June 16th. Line Bike is coming. Bike sharing is coming here in the city of Hartford, and we do have in the city now a complete streets ordinance that says that any project coming out throughout the city has to take into consideration the bike and pedestrian population. So there are some opportunities coming up.
To prevent bankruptcy, the city of Hartford accepted state oversight of its financial affairs in exchange for an infusion of state funds. What is your opinion of this situation? And as a state representative, what actions might you take to keep the city financially stable?
And that's a great question. Thank you. Let's face it, Hartford has a spending issue, and they still have a spending issue. It hasn't gone away. We've temporarily put a Band-Aid on it, but we haven't really actually fixed the problems. And as a state representative, it's solely not their focus to be a part of the budget, but voice their constituents' interests and bring those to the city council and explain to them what the voters think. Hartford, I am a City of Hartford employee, so I do see some excessive spending and not so smart choices that are made by the administration. But unfortunately, there are none that I can change. So in regard to the spending in the city and getting the city back on track, I believe it's up to the city council to come up with real solutions and the mayor to work together in order to change the spending in Hartford. It's also important for the voters and the people who live in the city to voice their concerns at city council meetings in order to address these issues. Your voice matters, and without your voice, they don't know the problems.
Forgive me, I'm not used to doing this, obviously. I actually have the Hartford Current here that talks about the Hartford bailout and the bond cap that other state legislators were concerned about. $550 million is a big, it's a big bailout for Hartford, even though it's over a series of years. But I guess we had to sell our soul for that, right? I mean, we had to give up control of our own budget and have oversight and all this. Meantime, the state is not really handling their budget issues that well, and now they have oversight on Hartford's budget. I would like to find a way to not have to use the state money. I would like Hartford to accept that help only for a couple years and find another way and not have that be a 10, 20-year commitment from the state.
I don't believe this is a bailout at all for the city of Hartford. It's a new partnership that we have established with the state. At day one from looking in the books when I was on city council, we knew we couldn't get out of this fiscal situation by ourselves. We knew we needed state support, and I have to give a lot of credit to the delegation, the Hartford delegation, for stepping up and having the opportunity to come and really stake the case for Hartford. So that's what we're going to have to do over the next 5 years. Remember, this is a 5-year plan that we have to do. We have to ensure that every legislator up at the Capitol has to understand the importance of a strong capital city. So we will have to go day by day, making sure that whether you're a legislator from Avon or Canton or down in Greenwich, the city of Hartford, the success of the city of Hartford, or the success of the state is dependent on the success of the city of Hartford.
Thank you.
To Councilman Concepcion's point, this is not a bailout. The first thing that you need to recognize as a state representative and advocate for and educate your colleagues on is that the state has a responsibility to its cities and especially to its capital city. Between 50% tax exempt properties in the city that are not getting us any revenue and the disproportionate amount of resources that we provide to the region, both in entertainment venues and stadiums, but also in services, shelters, etc. We really need to recognize our role in that, and in that we need to fight for increased aid. I agree with the fact that with Hartford accepting this aid, a Municipal Accountability Review Board was created, and I do think that when a city accepts aid or any municipality accepts aid, the state does have a right to see how that is being used and to ensure that that money is being used correctly rather than just going into the coffers into some black hole and being spent recklessly. That being said, beyond that, the state also needs to help cities to create new funds of revenue because right now we are restricted to property tax, which puts an undue burden on homeowners and business owners and does not allow for the city to make other types of revenue.
Thank you. So quality of life came up in the opening statements, I think, from several of the candidates. And so this question is about quality of life here in the 4th District. District 4 extends from I-84 on the north to the Wethersfield border on the south, in the south. There appears to be significant disparity between the north and the south portions of the district with regard to development and quality of life. With much of the development occurring in downtown and quality of life issues such as opioid usage, prostitution, homelessness, and criminal activity being concentrated in the neighborhoods south of downtown. What public policies would you prioritize during your first term in office to improve the quality of life for people living in the neighborhoods south of downtown?
Well, the policies would come after a proper assessment and a participatory process that involved all the stakeholders. Because to determine what, people are, if they're given the opportunity, they pretty much know what they need to be successful. But the problem is a lot of people haven't been being heard. There only certain voices are heard in our society. So I do realize that there is a big discrepancy in, the income levels and the education levels and across the board within that district. Same as it is within the city, within the state, within the nation. I actually have a copy of an old report put out by the ACLU where it talks about poverty and inequality, and there was a recent article in the Mirror, I believe, that talked about the increasing gap between the haves and the have-nots. This is something that has concerned me all my life. I worked in nonprofits all my life. After I grew up in the housing development on public assistance with a single mom and was a high school dropout and had to have supports to go back and get my diploma and go to college after I had kids. And those times were different. The supports were there. All those have been removed. Welfare reform is the worst thing that ever happened to low-income people in Connecticut. Connecticut has the strongest, most anti-poverty, anti-poor people mentality when it comes to welfare reform. The federal government gave 5-year limit. Connecticut gave 2.5-year limit. And then they invented jobs first. You got to go look for a job for a year before you can get any training. So the clock's ticking and people are getting kicked off assistance. That was the worst thing. The poverty now, the deep pockets of poverty that exist, is because a lot of those supports were eliminated, and people really need a lot of support to be able to get on their feet. It can happen. There's so much untapped talent here in Hartford. I hope we can find a way to help get people back on their feet.
Policy has to be driven with a focus on development of those major corridors, the Maples, the Wethersfields, the Franklins, with job creation, public safety, quality of life issues have to be tackled there. I think that being said, there's a major project that needs to be assured that is done, and that's the project over at the surface lots of Park and Main. I think that for years there has been a mental wall when you're driving south from downtown and into the neighborhoods. I think that we, as legislators, have to ensure that that project gets done for the better connectivity between the neighborhoods and downtown, which I believe will help focus areas in increasing, small business development and the quality of life of the residents in the South End.
I absolutely echo Councilman Concepcion's two projects that he mentioned. I actually worked when I was at the state on securing the $2.25 million that's going into the redevelopment of the three main corridors in the South End, which are hopefully forthcoming. But beyond that, I think housing is a really big struggle. I think that as we continue to build properties downtown, and it's great that people want to live there, we really need to pay attention to our buildings in the South End, because there are a lot of blighted properties and a lot of absentee landlords, some which are getting tax abatements from the city, and we need to create stricter processes for addressing those and help and encourage the city to really enforce those policies. I think to your point about opioids, the drug problems absolutely add to the quality of life issues in the South End, the prostitution, without a doubt. I am in favor of regulating and taxing marijuana, making it legal, and directing that revenue to opioid addiction services. But beyond that, I would say that being an available and accessible representative really does make a difference, because in the 2 months that we have not had one, we have seen those changes. We have seen the increased prostitution, we have seen the increased violence, the increased dumping, and our last state representative did a great job of being on the streets, knowing what the community needs were, and if you are not on the streets and aware of those needs, then you cannot advocate for them with the city or the state.
Quality of life is absolutely an issue in our district, to include parts of downtown. That falls in our district. Between 2011 and 2013, I served on the Southeast Conditions Unit, which is no longer in existence in the Hartford Police Department. The unit was created to address quality of life issues like noise, trespassing, drug dealing, noise complaints, motor vehicle violations. It doesn't exist anymore. For several reasons, due to retirements and lack of officers. The chief has created a new unit, which is citywide. It's only 4 officers, but in order to fix quality of life in the city, we need to address it through policing. That is the only way. A lot of crime takes place, and unfortunately, the police department doesn't have enough officers to address that crime. In order for businesses to come into the city and feel safe and not be victimized by burglaries and criminals, we need to address the quality of life issues through enforcement of the law. Thank you.
But what is your position on legalizing marijuana in Connecticut, and how did you reach your decision? So why don't we start with Julio and just work our way back down this way?
I'm actually in favor of legalizing marijuana, and to echo something Jess said, as long as the money raised goes to a specific cause, including opioid, making sure that substance abuse is challenged. And the reason I came to the conclusion is just looking at the rest of the states that have legalized marijuana. I think there's a lot of case studies out there, and we in Connecticut usually are last in New England to do anything different. So I think it's an opportunity here to really look at the situation and really begin moving the needle towards what I think is going to eventually be at some point a federal law anyways. So I think it's an opportunity for us to step forward and use the revenues of taxing and of marijuana and to good public use.
So I've already stated that I'm in favor, and a lot of my reasoning actually echoes Councilman Concepcion's. I can't tell you how many meetings I sat on when I was at the state where people would talk about needing to stop being behind Massachusetts and New York. And then when something radical came up, we'd say, well, let's wait and see how it goes for Massachusetts. And that's not a good response in my book. I think that we need to make more calculated risks and start taking a lead. And I think that this is definitely one way to do so. I think we're already a little bit behind the ball. And again, as I stated before, we definitely need that revenue to go towards opioid addiction services. First and foremost, if we get Colorado revenues from it, then maybe we can set a percentage of that. And I think that through legalization, taxation, and regulation, that's really how we can at least encourage people to engage in usage in a more healthy way. If it's something that is criminalized and hidden, then we can't really see the full usage, the full effects, and help our neighbors and especially our kids to be safer as they venture into that.
Thank you. I am against legalizing marijuana for several reasons. My own opinion, marijuana is a gateway drug. Just like the opioid crisis, when we had a lot of illegal prescriptions being issued by doctors, we're going to run into the same issue with marijuana. Two, what's going to happen when your employer subjects you to a drug test? Obviously, you're going to fail the drug test, regardless of your medical marijuana use or your legalized use that's being proposed. So we have to look at a lot of issues with marijuana. Back when it was penalized by law, when it was a crime, I've made numerous arrests where people were actually behind the wheel driving, which falls under a DUI. So we have to be smart when we come towards talking about legalizing marijuana and its actual good use.
For years, I testified up at the LOB in favor of medical marijuana. I had a family member that was terminally ill, and that helped keep her alive for many years because it helped her keep her medication down and helped her have an appetite. As I learned more about other states legalizing recreational use and seeing the benefits of the taxation and the regulation, and also knowing that it would make sense to get it off the streets where it's being sold in combination with other types of drugs and exposing our teenagers, or sometimes even younger, and sometimes older, people that are out there looking for something, like my mom actually had to do for my sister when she was ill. It should be the same as alcohol. It should be regulated. You should have to be a certain age, and the state should be able to tax that and put that money to good use. There's no reason to have all these people, all this criminalization of something that is so natural and that is so much more healthy for people, and have all these people sitting in jail for no reason.
Well, it's a very good evening, great questions back and forth. I have one comment on the marijuana thing. There's a reason they call it dope. Anyway, here's a tough question for all of you. There is a proposal now to put a service center for ex-cons, which paper calls them ex-cons, and people who've had trouble in their life, a service center in the rear of City Hall with no security. Now, I heard on TIC the other day that those that come out of Connecticut prisons have an 83% recidivism rate. Now, the idea of this service is to cut that down, which is a laudable goal. But if you were to cut it by 50%, you'd still have 4 out of 10 troubled people coming to City Hall with no security and in the middle of our $1 billion investment. Now, it's not a question of if it were to happen, but it's a question of when one of these, I feel sorry for them, but one of these troubled people are going to cause a major problem. They're going to grab a pocketbook, they're going to break into a car, they're going to deal drugs, or they're going to follow their lifestyle as most of them will. So the question to all of you is, does it make sense to have a service center for troubled people in City Hall with no security?
I appreciate and respect your question very much, Mike. I think we're asking the wrong question. I think it's not about where that center goes. I think it's about what we're doing and what services are we providing. Right now, people are getting dropped off at South Green. Are we saying that, oh, well, we want to keep the problems in South Green instead of in the middle of our city? What are we doing with reentry? What services are we providing? I believe the city may or may not still have a director of reentry. Unclear on that. I'm not sure what they're doing with that program. And beyond that, I can remember hosting or staffing a meeting when I was at City Council for CDBG funding and having several different organizations that work on reentry, not knowing what the other ones did, and being really excited to meet each other because suddenly they knew somebody who could help their clients in ways that they couldn't. So I think that we need to first focus on getting better at getting services out to our reentry citizens, regardless of where that location is, because I think that will have a much more lasting impact.
I absolutely believe it's not a good idea to have that at City Hall. It's not the municipality's responsibility to cater to people who have decided to break laws, commit crimes. If a nonprofit organization like one that Mary has worked for the last 30 years wants to provide services to individuals who are released from prison, I believe that's a good idea. But I only believe that this idea is part of Mayor Bronin's failed governor race, but obviously he's going to run again next term, and he's doing everything he can to gain voters. But having a reentry program at City Hall where other services are provided to residents and visitors of the city is absolutely a bad idea. There's only one officer assigned to City Hall Monday through Friday, and their primary responsibility is to safeguard the building and the employees inside of it. In order to facilitate a security or another police officer downstairs is going to require maybe one or two that the police department cannot handle at this time.
Yeah, whether it's at City Hall or somewhere else, all I know is it's definitely needed. I use the Main Street Library a lot, and I talk to people that are sitting outside, and so many of them have been relocated to Hartford after being incarcerated. I was talking to a young man yesterday who did 6 years, and he's been released now 2 months. But when I said, well, where'd you grow up? What end of town? He's like, oh, no, I'm from New Haven. But they left me here. You know, so many people, I've heard this time after time. The services do need to be somewhere. I ran a food pantry for 18 years as part of our center, and we had people there in need all the time. I think in 18 years, two cell phones disappeared. I mean, you know, people don't tend to bite the hand that feeds them. I believe that, you know, people appreciate when they're getting some services. I would need more details about the actual setup of the building and what access they're going to have to other offices. But if they want to do it in City Hall, God bless them. You know, the services need to happen somewhere, and I tend to feel if people do their time, they deserve to be given the benefit of the doubt that they really want a new start.
Thanks. And I think the notion that there's no security there is a little misguided, obviously. There's Officer Baird, who's an absolute rock star at City Hall, is there. You know, not all the time. Obviously, he has other responsibilities, but when Officer Baird's not there, we also have bid ambassadors, bid security ambassadors that stroll in and through City Hall. So I just wanted to make sure people understand that there is security there. You know, I've been at City Hall when the center opened, and there have been no issues. And to Mary's point, I think whether it's at City Hall or anywhere else, you know, these are services that are needed. You know, the coordination of social services is something that the city and the state, frankly, has lacked. So if it has to start at City Hall with individuals coming in, then God bless them. I think there's an opportunity because, again, what Mary said of having the library right next door, where there are a ton of individuals at the Hartford, our great Hartford Public Library, that are looking for other services. I think this is a great, it could be a great coalition between both entities.
Hi, thank you for taking the time to meet with us, and great turnout and a lot of familiar faces here. My question is regarding specifically ICE. About 3 weeks ago, a woman on Wethersfield Avenue, walking her children to school near Seatown, was pulled over by an unidentified vehicle, no markings, an ICE officer. Brought her in the car and said she was going to be held for questioning. She was brought for questioning after she dropped off the children at school and was held for questioning the entire day at an ICE location. I don't know where that is, but she was held. She was questioned. She was not provided a translator. She was not provided an interpreter. Assuming that a woman who is brown and is from Mexico and speaks Spanish is incorrect, she spoke Mixteco, and there was no translator. She signed a bunch of forms under duress. She signed them because she needed to pick up her kids from school after school. no bond, just that she's going to be deported. She has to show up every month in front of the immigration judge, and this is where it's at right now. Her main bread provider, her husband, was deported 2 days later. He was also detained and held on Wethersfield Avenue by this person, ICE officer. My question is, what's going on with ICE in Hartford? It's a sanctuary city, but we're allowing this, and this is happening, and there's no police involvement. This woman was illegally detained by an ICE officer, and now wears an ankle bracelet, is running with fear. I met with her about a week ago, and on a location where she was terrified, that she might be detained in that spot where we were talking about where she was going to have, she has to move because she has to pay rent. She has her 3 children who are American citizens, and she asked me, if she were to show up at one of the meetings, would I please go pick up her kids at school and work with DCF so that I can hold on to them, because she can't get a passport because dad has been deported. So what is your positions with the ICE arrest and what's happening in our community?
Thank you, and that's a great question. I probably won't have enough time to answer it. ICE is a federal law enforcement agency. Let's get that understood. They are police. They are federal police. They are not Hartford local police, but they are police officers. They are federal agents. They enforce federal laws in regard to immigration. They are in the city because there are a large number of undocumented immigrants in this city, and they are doing their job. In order to stop that, that's nothing a state legislator is going to do. That is federal law that has already been established, and there are reasons behind federal law that none of us on this stage, if we become state representatives, is going to change as a state representative. So, in regard to your question about what to do, I would recommend, if you're seriously in a position where you want to change that, I would contact a state senator. Okay? Thank you.
I was at a meeting a couple weeks ago over on Park Street that Richard Blumenthal attended, and we talked about this case. And all of us that were at that meeting were very upset about the fact that somebody could be detained, that a person could be picked up by someone in an unmarked car and petrified. And Richard Blumenthal asked us a bunch of questions about it, and there was another worker there that was working with this mom and told us that the dad was getting ready to be deported. So I'm sorry to hear that actually happened. Those of us who have been advocates for immigrants in need of a status adjustment, our hands are pretty much tied right now, other than helping people actually find sanctuary. There are numerous people staying in Connecticut churches while their cases are being argued. Well, you have to make sure people have access to a good lawyer. And the families that are stranded like this, that really have no place to go back to, because people have been here for decades. I know people, around the state that are going through this. They have lives that they built here, they pay their taxes, they've raised their children, and they do not have criminal records other than not having, immigrated properly. These are people that we want to keep here. We should be helping them become citizens. I disagree with Brian that a state rep cannot challenge these federal laws. I think it's any good politician's moral duty to challenge laws that are unjust.
First of all, I'm disheartened at that story. It's something that obviously has happened far too often throughout this country, as individuals are being detained without proper cause. So it's something, again, that is something that we need to work on. I was proud on the city council to support the sanctuary city resolution, and I think that was a huge step. That was led by one of my colleagues, Minority Leader Bermudez, and it's something that I think we need to work to leverage here in the city of Hartford. I was proud to again support that. I think there is an opportunity here, though, to as we coordinate services throughout this city, to look at families like this and giving them opportunities at the library as they're looking to become citizens, offer them free lawyers, free legal advice. So there are opportunities, I think, that both at the legislative and the state level that we don't need support from the federal level at that point, that we can do stuff on our own.
I think a lot of people are quick to forget that this country was built on immigrants coming to it and refugees coming to it. I think that there are a lot of immigrants who came here in the 90s and the 80s who forget that they came here legally because they had a path to come here legally. That path does not exist for many of the people choosing to do so now in America, which has been a country for refugees, should still provide opportunities for such. I think it is very convenient to choose when we want states to have rights and when we want to say, oh, well, those are federal police, we have to listen. I think that we need to flex our state rights with our rights to accept the citizens that we want, and I'm proud that this state and this city have taken a lead in doing that. The endorsed Democratic candidate for Attorney General is one who has made ICE and immigration a key part of his platform, and I think that all of the delegations from the major cities who face this issue disproportionately should work with him to advocate, to be ears in each of their cities, to work on policies that work as he fights the federal laws that are allowing this to happen. And I think that we need to create a healthy immigration policy into the United States and a process for people that are illegal and not engaging in criminal activity to become legal. And until doing so, I don't think that the federal police should be picking up citizens in our city.
Thank you. So we have a lot of questions and we have not as much time. So in answering your question, try to be as concise as possible because we want to allow each of the candidates the opportunity to respond to each question.
Good evening. First day, whichever one of you is elected to the state legislature, you're going to probably be asked by some of the leadership to familiarize yourself with the state budget. Okay, you're going to be confronted with a $4 billion deficit. Probably the most important thing you will do as state legislators, I hope, is to eliminate that budget. How are you going to do it?
How am I going to eliminate the budget deficit? That's the question. All right. Well, first of all, let me say that I am a socially progressive liberal person, but I am a fiscally practical person. I ran an agency for 18 years with a budget of $175,000. $175,000 for 3 full-time, 2 part-time, rent, utilities, food for the food pantry, you name it, we had it. I know how to get free labor though. So I'm good with finding volunteers, I'm good with making partnerships, and I'm good at spending very little money to get the results that I need to achieve. When I read a couple weeks ago in the Current that DECD gave away $150 million to companies to do job creation, and then said, well, they don't have to give us any reports. We don't know if the money was wisely invested or not. We just trust them. I'm like, well, how many departments is that going on in? And that was just for 1 year, 2016, $150 million. Unaccountable, unaccounted for. So I don't necessarily believe in raising taxes to be able to have better services for people, even though, I want to see universal health care, I don't want people sleeping in the streets, but I want better spending, and I want to stop the misappropriations and the lack of transparency with money that's already there.
Thanks, and Ted, thanks for that question. I mean, I think all options have to be obviously on the table. I think one of the biggest issues that the state faces is something that the city faces, just at a smaller scale is the unfunded liabilities. So, the pensions, the benefits that have been accruing for years from contracts that, predate, many of us here on the dais here. So, looking at what those unfunded liabilities are, working with our state unions, and seeing how we can kind of shrink that gap within. I think consolidation of some departments need to be discussed. I mean, I know there were some consolidations a few years ago, but there's always opportunities to consolidate some departments that I think do dual work here in the state. And at the end of the day, I mean, the only way we're really gonna get out of this funk is to grow, is to market ourselves as a friendly business community state. And it's an opportunity. So while we're looking at the expense side and seeing how we can cut here and cut there, we also have to see how we can grow as a state and incentivize businesses to relocate, grow, and expand here.
Having worked at the State Senate and in the Finance Committee, I have a lot of strong feelings on how we can do our budgeting better. First and foremost, I think that the fact that our Finance and Appropriation Committees are separate is a big problem, and that the Appropriations Committee actually gets to report before the Finance Committee is also a problem. You don't decide what you want to spend and then find the money to raise it. You have to determine a budget and then decide how you want to spend it. And if you don't have enough, you look for efficiencies. I definitely think there are efficiencies to be found in state agencies, absolutely. And we need to find ways to fund unfunded pension liability. And unfortunately, at this point, if cuts need to be made, that does need to happen. However, we also really need to take a deep look at our tax code. Over the years, it has become very muddied with exemptions and fees that nobody really knows where that started anymore. And I really think somebody needs to do a deep dive, hopefully with a couple of like-minded colleagues, because it will be a big task to take on alone. And also look at the way that our taxes are emphasized. So currently, our tax system focuses on goods. Primarily, you're taxed on goods, and services are not taxed as high. However, our economy is shifting into a format in which people are consuming more services than goods. So how do we make sure that our tax code keeps up with the economy in a world that is ever-changing and an economy that is ever-changing and becoming more global? How do we make our tax code less specific to the situation we had 20 years ago and move it into today and hopefully the future?
Ted, my friends on stage talk about cutting the budget, but they want to create programs that are against federal law, like keeping sanctuary cities and providing sanctuaries, which only put a burden on the budget in the city of Hartford, even more. There's plenty of areas where we can cut funding and provide less benefits. One being the state rep position. This position is a $28,000 position a year, which I don't know if any of you knew, but it also, at the end of the term, includes health care and a pension. I don't know the exact numbers, but why would somebody that serves 2 years be afforded for the rest of their lives money from a state for 2 years? I mean, our city council alone wants to cut police and fire benefits, but they don't want, their benefits for the state rep and elected officials stay the same. I'm sure this is the same for the city council. And I'm sure they receive lifetime health care along with the mayor, who has forced police and fire into these health savings accounts, which are not going to work. So there's plenty of areas where we can cut funding, but we gotta be smart about it and realistically think about what we're doing.
Thank you. I want to get with the black.
Thank you. I agree actually with that.
I had a couple of questions, and I had to narrow it down to one, and I think this is the appropriate setting for it, because we're here to talk about elections and voting. Hartford has an abysmal, is there anything lower than abysmal rate of voter turnout? We're talking like this. It's kind of pathetic when you think about it. And we're not seeing, outside of Hartford Votes, Hartford Vota, nobody
is except the candidates themselves, is encouraging people to get out and vote. When this happens, we have very, very strange elections where people can win an election with a couple of hundred votes out of a city of, not all voters, but 125,000 people. We get a little better turnout during national election season every 4 years, but state elections, Board of Education elections, abysmal in the city. Town committee elections, with the very few that there are. And municipal elections could be an awful lot better. I would like to know what the candidates think of this. Do you understand, do you agree that we have pathetic voter turnout and there's not enough being done to educate voters and to get them out there so that this city has a better turnout and perhaps better candidates and different election results? We're getting a lot of the same old, same old. What would you do?
That's a great question, Ann. And yes, I agree with you 100% that we need to work on our voter turnout in every single election. It was an embarrassment the last Board of Ed election when only 5% of the voters turned out for that vote. You know, one of the things, and I'm sure some of my colleagues have experienced this, when door knocking and you tell individuals, one, that there's an election coming up, and two, that it's on a Monday. Those two things, I mean, blow people away. So we do have to do a better job. I do have to give credit to the ROV. Maybe it's the first time I've noticed this, that there were cards that were sent out to each individual voter in the district that I think really did the trick, because it really did open up people's eyes that there is an election coming up. So, but you're absolutely right, and we have to start working with even stronger with the Secretary of State's office, where she needs to step up a little bit in particular urban areas, because those are the ones that really lack in voter turnout, and here in the city of Hartford. So doing whatever programs we can to get into the high schools, to get into every single nonprofit that we can, to encourage voting and making sure that people know that elections are happening when they are, when the deadlines are for switching from a D to an R or to a U. All those things need to happen on a more concise basis.
To your first question, I absolutely agree that voter turnout is abysmal. As far as how to address it, I think Julio's point about the Secretary of State is a good one. I think that we need to work with the Secretary of State, the ROV, and then local organizations like the Hartford Votes Coalition to really reach all of our communities. But I think as far as actually turning out to vote and not just getting registered, what that requires is having investment in the community and investment from their representation. Because when you only see people every 2 years or every 4 years when there's an election, well, why do people care to turn out to vote for you or against you? Because they don't know you. So I think that we need to also hold our elected officials to being more accountable, to being more accessible throughout their terms, and not only when they're looking for votes, so that, you know, if elected, you can hate me, great, come out and vote against me. You can love me, awesome, come out and vote for me, but it's because you know what you're voting for, because you're an informed voter, and because you care about what happens to the city and who's representing it.
In high school, I had a class called American Government, and you know, it focused a lot on the history of government, but it didn't really focus on who was I going to vote for as the Hartford mayor, or who was I going to vote for as a city council. So I think, you know, at the high school level in our public school system, we could try to incorporate that a little bit better, and teaching them, you know, who our elected officials are locally and at the state level. And I believe I had that class at a senior year, so I was around 17 years old. So I think it's important, you know, at a senior high school level to incorporate one of those classes, so that, you know, when they graduate high school and they're able to vote, you know, they're more aware of what's going on, what party do I want to be a part of, instead of the one democratic rule that we have here in the city, or the working families rule. Thank you.
Yeah, of course, I agree that our voter participation is horrible, and it was the same in New Britain, and it's the same in a lot of major cities. I don't think it's much of a problem out in the suburbs, right? And what is it, why? So are people just not happy with the choices that exist, or do they consider them false choices? You know, what, you have the Democrats and the Republicans, is there a big difference between them? I think the largest voting bloc is actually unaffiliated voters, but if there's no candidate to pique their interest, or there's no issues being discussed that people can identify with, why bother voting? I mean, the people who could vote when I was out petitioning and who didn't want to bother to register, because I had the voter registration forms, they're like, no, I know it's